So this episode already, Chris, I would say we've already invested like 40 minutes into this podcast that nobody will ever know about because of the on-ramp. And today the on-ramp was a really good one. I felt like in my mind, as I think about the word on-ramp, obviously for me, I think of highways and getting on, getting off. But today I felt like I was just going around in a circle. I was on the on-ramp or the off-ramp, or whatever you want to call it, and I never really got anywhere in terms of how good it was. We just kept going. And what you said 30 seconds before I hit broadcast was, I wonder where we're going to go with the podcast today because of the on-ramp. So let me throw something down. And then if you like it, let's go with it. If you don't like it, let's not go with it. I do want to bring some of the on-ramp in today.
Okay.
I do, because I feel like you and I did a bit of the work before the work.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so we were talking about change. I was talking about change. I was talking about moving to a new school. And you said that some of the things that we talked about is some of the stuff that people really should be hearing. Because if we're talking about decoding education, breaking it down or building it up, some of the things that we were talking about in the on-ramp are exactly what people should hear about a person moving to a new school. And I'm being selfish, obviously, because it would benefit me a little bit to talk about it. But let's just start with the basics.
Yep.
When you leave one place, you are letting go of everything that place means to you. So let me break that down. If you're well respected in the place you're at, you're leaving that and you're going somewhere where people don't really know you. And so everything you've built that's positive in the one building is kind of not worth much in the second building. Now, it might be worth something to the administrator that interviewed you and hired you because they saw something there that they liked. They see something that they think this is going to work well with the culture of the new school, right? So obviously they like it. And they've compared you to the other people that have been interviewed. And at the end of it, they're just like, okay, I think that this staff member has something to offer. This staff member will be valuable to the school community, to the students, to the staff, to the parents, everybody. So that's a good thing. But when you're at your new school, you're not working with your administrator. You're in a classroom, you're with the kids, and you're dealing primarily with the kids and your colleagues and your parents. You're not dealing with the administrator. So that level of acceptance that you've now been kind of given because you've been chosen to move, you've been chosen to enter a new place, it doesn't mean a whole lot. It means a lot on a philosophical level, but not in the trenches. In the trenches, you're with the kids, you're with your other colleagues, you're working together to make things happen. So that brings on some anxiety. I'm a little nervous. Now, mind you, I'm lucky in a way because I know some people at my new school. I've worked with them before, and I know them from my wife's school. I know them from social situations and professional situations. And so that helps. But I'm walking into a whole new culture, right? And I'm not the type to walk in and try to be the culture. No. I'm walking in and I'm going to be observing. I'm going to be listening. And I'm coming with my own thing because I'm responsible for my class. So I'm bringing with me my ideas on startup, my ideas about long range planning and where I want to take my kids. Am I open to that stuff shifting once I meet my new colleagues? Yes, I am. I'm open to the shift because if I weren't open to the shift, then that could cause me problems as well. So I'm open to the shift, but I have to come in feeling good about my values, feeling good about the way I run my show, because ultimately it's my classroom. Ultimately, I'm responsible. Nobody's going to come in and take over. So that's like the moving part. And then there's the leaving part. There is some feeling for me, and maybe there's for you, and I'll find out in a minute. There is some sadness about leaving, right? Like even if you've not had a great time at the place you're leaving, you've still been there for years. Like you've still invested time into the people there, whether you like it or not, right? Like you've invested the time into your kids. I've been at this old school now for 3 years. That's 3 classes that I've pushed through. That's like, for me, 70 plus students that I've taught. Almost, between 70 and 90 kids that I've directly taught, worked with, impacted, hopefully in a positive way. So there is sadness leaving. I'm starting to feel that I feel this nostalgia phase, even though I'm not gone yet. I think I told you, I don't know if I said on the podcast or not, but I caught myself last week or the week before standing in the hallway, and the bell was about to ring for me to bring my kids in from recess. And I found myself observing my work environment in a completely different way. And I had never seen it that way before. And the only reason why I was able to see it in this new perspective, from this new point of view, is because I'm leaving it. And so I'm in the middle of trying to pack up to go, and I'm excited about going, but I'm also feeling a little bit of sadness and nostalgia. And I'm really now living in the moment. So I will stop and I will observe and listen in ways that I've not done over the past 3 years. And so that's enriching in a way. Like, I'm really soaking it up, but I'm leaving. So I can't let that, once I leave, I gotta put that aside. And I have to do it in a way that's not going to cause me psychological difficulties as I move forward. That's my bit that I just wanted to throw down to get us started.
I love the okay. So where you ended there, that idea of the idea that you can cause yourself some, I think you said, psychological harm or damage. It's interesting. That's not in my OS. I don't have that part. For better, for worse, I often, in my leaping quick, I think I've come to understand that I tend to cause that damage for other people. As in, I don't know if I mentioned to you, but just having a former mentor ask me, how do I know when my team is ready for me to leave? And that being as important as my drive for change and my interest in new experiences. And that is where I've been existing, I guess, for this last week or so, is the idea that I may be causing harm to others by engaging in change for myself. And that, it's a difficult place to be in, because in my world, in my universe, change is a constant. And I feel in some ways that despite I get my agency and I'm making a decision, I also feel at a real low level that I am living mindfully with the sort of the needs of my reality. As in, if there's a curveball that's thrown to me, I'm going to exist in that space as the ball coming right up to it. Like, it's not me trying to map out how I'm going to swing at it as I see the ball coming. I'm going to react as close to the point as it's crossing the plate, and then take a swing. And it's not as if I sort of can perceive my life in slow motion, like somehow it's like a matrix move, like that's diving out of the way from the bullet. But I really do spend more time sort of anchored to the point of action. And then the next thing would still be another point of action. And I don't get overly, you said nostalgic. I'll use that word too. I don't fall quickly on the concept. Like, if I feel sad, some sadness, if I feel the emotion, let's say, of sadness as a result of the act of change, it's because I'm sort of in a moment of sadness that's right in front of me. I don't so much say, wow, I'm going to miss these kids next year. I sort of, or I'm going to miss my colleague or the context next year. Like, I don't stretch myself outside of that. I just have that realization that I feel sad right now. Why am I feeling sad? Well, I'm feeling sad because that if the student wasn't in front of me or here working with me when the student walks out the door, I try and narrow that to such a fine point that I feel I can then go on. I can then go on to the next thing. I've been accused of being kind of cold in that way. But I feel deeply. I'm just trying to stay right in what's in front of me. What should I be feeling about what's in front of me? And then, am I feeling that? Why aren't I feeling that? What's sort of pulling me from being mindful? And I got no suggestions on how to become deeper and mindful and sort of paying attention to what's in front of you, other than, you know, in the on-ramp, we were talking a little bit about the how do you manage the elation of change once you've accepted that you're going to go and you sort of project yourself into that next position. Well, the reality of it is that could be 2 weeks, that could be a year, that could be a long way out. And I think it was last week in the episode, we talked about closing well, like being able to focus on what's in front of you so that your leaving isn't somehow perceived as an escape. And because I think that if I speak to my change as a successful move, as in it's something I want to do, and I am engaged in the thinking of the planning for the next position, but at the same time making sure that my classroom is still taken care of. Okay, so here's one thing: I can't arrive in September and just deal with what's in front of me. So that whole mindful thing that I said, like, there's a truth. I have to plan and learn and connect in order to sort of get my head right for that. If I don't close well, I feel I run the risk of somebody saying, he's just kind of taking it easy, he's cruising, he's sort of like, he's done here and you can see it. Well, the truth is it's not done until the bell on that last day and we walk out the door. So when we were talking on the on-ramp about how do you not get too swept up in the elation of the change and the positivity of the change, or get pulled down too much by, down too much by your reality of having to close. I narrow my bandwidth. I just pay attention to what's in front of me. And when I do that, I'm confronted with a crap that I have to deal with. Like, I have to deal with the fact that I may be making life really hard for people. I have to deal with the fact that it's not just me in the classroom. There's other individuals that I need to speak to and explain myself. When I was doing my chef's apprenticeship, I think it was way back in the day. It was in Italian cuisine, and I could be completely breaking this idea right now. But they often talked about sneaky things, like the idea of being sneaky, as I think it's la gallina roba or la roba gallina, and it translates to chicken robber. That idea that you're sneaking in and out in the night and taking one or two of the chickens for your own gain. I've never really forgotten about that, because that was their version of talking about being sneaky. The intentionality, not only it's so well framed for me, doing it in a hidden fashion, doing it under disguise, doing it in the dark, taking from other people. Like, there's so many of that things that seem dishonest. So I've stopped a few times this past week and asked myself, am I being honest in my transition? And if not, that's where the tensions are. It's one of the funny kind of tensions. That's what I'm looking at in that middle bandwidth. Am I being honest with the individuals in my transition? And that's where my work is. That's the work that I'm doing right now. Thanks. That was a really long ramble.
No, I'm glad. It's when you talked about like your OS, it's funny. I wrote down here, Robot Chris fits with the alien sounds. So it's kind of like an inside joke to anybody who's listening, but I don't know. Long time listeners will remember. People who listen, who are connected via the Voice Ed Radio family. One time we were having our Thursday night On Ed Mentors podcast, whatever you want to call it, live podcast, and Chris came on, and there were all these like weird sounds in the background, sounded like alien sounds, whatever. I mean, that's what I called it, but I don't know what anybody else would. But it was like staticky, and Chris was talking, his voice was all like messed up and manipulated. So we told him, you got to get off, like you're making alien sounds or whatever. And then when you were talking about your OS not being wired in what I was thinking like a humanistic way, and I just attached you to being a robot. And for me, my theory that you're really not one of us is starting to fit more and more every time we talk. That you're just different. You're from another planet or something. So anyway, I thought I'd throw that down just for some humor that nobody's laughing at except you and I. But oh, and by the way, I wanted to tell you that the father of Voicehead Radio, I want to call him a godfather, but I'm going to call him Dad. When I was talking to him earlier this week, he said that he's heard some of our episodes. He's actually listened to Decoded podcast. I was blown away. I was like, now we have 2 listeners.
Oh, that's awesome.
You and McGuire. Thanks. Okay.
Did he offer any feedback? Or you want to bench that for later?
No. I don't recall any feedback that I would share with you right now. He didn't sound like elated, but he also didn't sound like
a hat tip.
It wasn't like you guys stink or you guys are the bomb. Yeah, it was more of a hat tip, like, hey, I've listened to some of it. Good on you guys, kind of thing. So that was nice to get that nod from the father of Voicehead Radio. But I'm glad that you allowed me to engage us in this little brief talk about that part of the school, leaving and coming. And it's so cool that we both have different perspectives on it, right? It's how I roll, I guess. And it's how you roll. And that's good for people to hear. 2 different educators and 2 different panels talking about how that change affects them. I think it's kind of cool, and I think it's worthwhile to go down that road because teachers will experience that in their career, moving from school to school. Some not as often as others. Like I've been to a lot of schools, and I thought that this one I'd be there a lot longer. So that's a whole other thing I'm dealing with too. Oh, here's a good one. It's starting to come out now amongst my staff that I'm leaving. So I didn't make any big announcements. I didn't send out an email. I did nothing. It's just when people say, I've told a few people, like people that I'm close to, I consider my friends. I said, yeah, I'm not going to be here next year. And they're like, awesome. Have a good time. Like, do what you need to do. But then the other people, I've just left it to letting it come up as it does. So the other day I took my kids outside for gym. It was actually on Thursday, June 7th, when voting was happening in our province. At my school, the gym was being used as a polling station. So we couldn't go to the gymnasium for physical education. So I took them outside. And there was another teacher outside with her students. And we were just chatting as we were supervising their activities. And she says to me, there's an open position in primary at my current school. And she said, hey, so have you thought about teaching primary? And I'm like, yeah, I have. And then she says, well, are you going to take the position? Are you going to teach primary next year? I said, yes, I am. And then she got all excited. And I said, but not here. And she's like, what? What are you talking about? And then we're like, oh, I'm moving. I'm going to be teaching grade 1 and 2. And she says, where are you going? And this is the best because schools in my system have a reputation, as I'm sure schools in most systems do. So I told her the name of the school that I'm going to, and she's like, you're going there? In a disapproving way. Not in a, whoa, you're going there. It was like, you're going there? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going there. And this is another thing. It's like, do you explain yourself to people or do you just go with it? And I'm like, I'm not explaining myself to you. I'm not going to tell you how much discernment it took and conversations with people and blah, blah, blah to help me make the decision that's best for me and my life, right? Which is so interesting because I was able to actually step out of myself and observe this conversation in a really interesting way. And so that's kind of what I'm dealing with now. Now it's kind of come out. I'm leaving. So people are curious. They want to know why. They want to know where, which is fine. But there's that extra layer of dealing with the response you get based on where you're going, right? Which is very interesting to me. I was joking with my wife about it the other day, and she's like, Rolland, just, what you're doing what you're doing because it's best for your work, your life, the family. Like you've made your decision. You didn't make it loosely, right? So are you bothered? Are you not bothered? I'm like, no, it's just that extra layer. It's just that extra layer that now maybe I'm more aware because we talk about this stuff. I actually talk to somebody every week about what happened to me at work, about the things that I'm thinking about, the things I'm experiencing. So I don't know if you get that, but I'm getting that layer of, oh, you're going there, and I'm not going to get into it with you about like the different school communities and how people seem to rank them in my system or, whatever they get from it. But it's interesting because they're turning my leaving into a negative, whereas my leaving for me is a huge positive, right? Like, so it's interesting where you got these two people that come together and they each have differing opinions and they both think they know what's best for the person that's leaving. It's very interesting, especially when you're looking at it from a bird's eye perspective.
I observe in people the automatic response. If I survey the automatic responses to me speaking about change when I create change or I try a new project, and on one wrapped around this is a perception of how profound the change is. Like, I'm not talking small changes like you decide to have a hazelnut coffee instead of an Earl Grey tea. Like that can, for some people, they're like, whoa, like you're changing, dude, and I don't know you anymore. Like that kind of like, what's up with that? Some of the bigger ones that have let's say a broader ripple effect, I find that that more often the positive elements of that change are not reflected back to me. The joy, whether or not I'm presenting it neutrally or I'm happy or I'm sort of like down on it, I find more often than not I'm presented with a sort of like it's mentioned back, like there's challenge there. And to that end, the school that I'm going to is there's a commute now. There's very little commute for where I am right now, but there's a commute. And sort of, I speak to people in the board that know where I'm currently working. Some of them not even necessarily, I think, plugging in that they know where I'm working, but they sort of throw down that there's a commute to the new school. And that's I would say it's almost a neutral response, but as a countermeasure, I would say it's presenting a negative element about my change. Only a few people, and you, like me, my spouse, we had long conversations about the impact on the family about changing. She has change going on. So there's a mapping out, there's a planning, there's a strategy that has to be logical to us. I haven't had outside the family unit and you and a couple other, let's say, inner circle people, the general response to me shifting programs has been, if I do a survey, is like, wow, that's going to be a commute for you. And I haven't presented, like, I understand that they can just be informative. I get that they can be concerned. I get that they may be confused, as in why, because part of me getting close to home was something that was ideal. Like, it was ideal that I could be closer to my kid's school and closer to all that kind of stuff. That was a part of the now 3 years ago. It's not part of the now. It's if I, right? The plan changes. And not everybody can, nor do they have the right to understand all of my chess moves. But people want to. I've come to accept that people want to. Their reality and their stability in their reality can sometimes include controls on my reality. They want to understand. It's not a wanting to understand. It's a need for me to conform. And I just kind of accept that as that's their method. And often, I'll stay in that conversation a little bit longer just to sort of check in, and less about expressing my desire to change, but I want to understand their psychology. And a few times what I'm finding is that I'm speaking to someone that isn't entirely comfortable with change, not entirely. And there's a whole lot of kind of operating system around that, but their perception of, let's say, success within education is the staying in one school. And actually, I'm going to stop there, staying in one school, because I wouldn't sort of step any further that they have a perception of building something new or getting other experiences within the school. For a long time, I've been a proponent of that, in order to gain change in education, I believe you have to accept the reality that you need to change schools, because the school is a very big beast. It doesn't move things within it. There's a whole lot of life inside the school that can shift, but the school itself shifts slowly. And we went to my kids' elementary school. Wow. So my kids' elementary school, we went to the 50-year anniversary. I think it was at the end of May. And there were teachers there. From like 25, 30 years ago. And I don't know them, of course, but I heard conversations, and they're saying things like, there was as many people saying, wow, it's exactly as I remember it, as wow, it's really different than when I was here. And I think that's a critical conversation to exist in when we're talking about change for ourselves, because for a large number of those individuals, it's the exact same experience that they walked away from. So there you have the stability. And then for the other ones that are saying it's very different, there you have the other counterpoint, is that change did happen. Which camp are you in? Well, I tend to be the one that would just notice that things aren't changing. It's kind of the same. So I would move. But I don't think everyone is comfortable with that conversation. I think we want our realities, which extend further than what coffee am I having this morning and what clothing am I going to wear, to I feel stable because I'm keeping my environment around me stable. And as long as the individuals in there keep doing what I perceive to be stable, then I'm good with that too. Moving forward into September, I've kind of admitted to myself that I think I'm going to go back to my daily vlogs. I think that was a powerful reflective tool for me. Sort of do a little 5-minuter at the end of the day, sometime on the fly, to be able to sort of track. And I'm thinking back to our last week conversation about getting more on tape, like sort of like tracking more on tape the process, if someone happens to find it useful, because they can kind of check in on somebody else's process, then so be it. But I think I'm going to go back to that. I'm going to go back to doing the little YouTube videos about my dailies. So
that's kind of how I was introduced to you when I first met you. I remember you'd be sitting in your car,
yeah,
and the phone would be down here and looking up at you, and you'd just be talking, looking out the window, just doing your thing. I thought it was kind of cool. Good for you to be able to use that tool to help you. And I think it's neat that you feel like it's something that you should start back up again when you start up in September. I like that. And I look forward to watching some of those videos and seeing what you're up to and who's influencing you and your perspective on what you're doing and how your new school's running. It's just a different perspective, right? Like I could easily text you and say, hey, how's your new school going? But it's not the same when you can check out someone's like raw filtering in the moment, right? Because if I text you and I ask you, how are things going? I think I'm gonna get one type of response. Whereas if I'm watching your YouTube video that has nothing to do with me or any prompt from me, I'm just gonna get more like raw Chris, what he's thinking at that moment. No filter, different filter than what I'm gonna get from a text message to you. But anyway, that's neither here or there. It's just I wanted to kind of share that awareness or my thinking around it. I don't know. I really enjoyed talking about this transfer thing, moving schools, and what it really feels like. I know we're only two people, and I feel differently than you feel, but it's just to say it's important, I guess, to acknowledge what that experience is for yourself, right? And I know when you told me you were leaving your school, I remember part of our conversation involved you explaining to me, and it wasn't because I was forcing it out of you, I don't think, but explaining to me your process, sitting down with your partner and talking about the family dynamic and what would this look like for our family if I was there, not here, right? And I think, maybe people that don't have kids might not need to engage that way. Maybe people that don't have a partner, none of this matters. They go where they think will serve their career best, or where they'll be able to serve best. For everybody's different. I think it's cool to hear about it. I don't think people don't talk about it much. Like in my world, I know some people who are moving schools and moving into new positions, and I've not said to them, hey, tell me how you're feeling and how you came to this conclusion. Like, that's just I'm not going to do that, right? And I don't expect them to tell me how they made their decision. But it's interesting because when you're put in a situation where someone's looking at you and they're questioning your judgment based on your move, it's interesting. Because do you go there? See, for me, I'm okay to drop a couple of tidbits on the high end. Like, I'm not ready to go deep with you. If I'm gonna go deep, I've already done it. You're close to me, and I've already told you my thinking process, just because I shared my thinking process, not because you were questioning my judgment or you were questioning my move. I think when that happens to me, I just say, yeah, thanks for letting me know what you think. It's all good. What else do you say? Do you take 20 minutes to talk about your life? I don't want to do that with people if I've not already done it with you, then I'm probably not going to do it. I'm not going to talk about that. And that's the cool thing too about our job. People know us as teacher at work, unless you're really close with people. So when I go to work, sometimes I tell you, I have a chuckle after, certain conversations with my colleagues, because they have no idea what I do outside of work. So I will come off one way at school, but outside of school, I'm completely different. And I like that about me. I also like that people generally are shocked to hear that I'm an educator. So when I'm talking to parents at baseball or whatever, they say, so what do you do? Oh, I'm a classroom teacher. I don't usually get, oh, how sweet. I get, really? Tell me more about this. Why is it that is the reaction I get? I'm not 100% certain. But I do find it interesting. Maybe what I'll do next time, just as an experiment, is the next time I'm with someone that I don't know and they ask me what I do, I think I might say something like I work in a factory. And I'm not putting down factory work. I'm just saying, does that fit better with the way I act in public and the way I appear? Will that fit nicer for people? I'm a factory worker, or I work at a steel mill or something that has to do with like manly stuff, rugged stuff, hard work that involves sweat, and a little bit of pain. Little do they know that my brain as a teacher is sweating and crying all day long from it's more psychological, right? The physical part's not there, but the emotional part, the psychological part. I've read articles on the internet, this stuff about why teachers are so exhausted at the end of the day. It's because they have to make more decisions during their workday than like a surgeon or something like this, right? Like all day our brains are calculating and recalibrating all day because we're dealing with people, we're dealing with problems. And I don't mean to say that the whole day is a problem, but issues come up and you got to make decisions. So you're constantly making decisions, you're constantly judging, you're constantly balancing, you're constantly juggling up here. And so, we are exhausted at the end of the day. At my house, I don't know about yours, but on Fridays, we feel a certain way. And so on a Tuesday, my wife might say to me, I've got the Fridays today, and I'm going to have to bust out of it fast because I got to wake up and go to work tomorrow.
Wow.
Right? And when you got the Fridays on a Tuesday, on a Tuesday, it's a problem. On a Friday, it's perfect because you get that general shutdown mode for the weekend. But when you feel it on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, oh boy, you better reset because you got to go back in the next day, and there's no room for you to be tired. There's no room for you to be able to make those quick decisions all day long. That's why I find professional learning during the day to be quite valuable to someone like me, and just other things. So, for example, this past week, I was one of the supervisors that went with the students to the regional track and field meet. And so for me, it was a great way for my week to be broken up because I got to leave. And even though I was still on school time, I was still acting as a teacher from the school, I was still making those decisions. It was different because it wasn't in my classroom. It wasn't with my kids. It was a completely different context, but it still allowed me to return to my classroom the next day, refreshed, rejuvenated, because I had had that day away. And for me, I've always found that to work for me. So what I love is being part of committees and stuff is that not only do I get to have an idea of like what's happening in the system and how I can do good for the system, is how the system's doing good for me by providing me with this knowledge and understanding that I wouldn't normally get. But also it refreshes me to go back to my classroom, to either try new things or to think about things in a different way, and just to have been away from that day of making those decisions all day and processing all day with these 28 kids. That for me is good stuff. And this year I've not been, see how talking to you about this stuff in this podcast really helps me, because it's making me aware of things that I'm not normally aware of. This year, I've been exceptionally more tired than other years. And I think it's because I've not been out as much, which sounds really weird because a lot of teachers try not to go out. Mm-hmm. I like that balance. I like to be out here and there so that I can get a different perspective and I can come back in a way that refreshes me for my kids. I've not had a lot of that this year, and so I've not been able to refresh the way that I've been used to over the past few years.
Yeah, it's that refreshment is part of what's motivating me to also change position. So I tweeted out this past week something about, someone was talking about professional development, and I said, I'm looking forward to getting back to the big staff room where there's more individuals inputting into my learning, and I can observe. I was in another conversation talking about how I left my previous position with total side story, but a fear of teaching math. And I feel like my time away, I've taught myself that I can teach math, but also that there's areas of it that I didn't even know I was interested in before. So I'm coming back now with sort of tools that will not only help me, I mean, at the heart of it, I'll tell you, it fundamentally, it helps me because the confidence to sort of step into a new role will help students. It'll help the school. It'll help colleagues. So it's kind of like, there isn't that direct correlation, like somehow I'm a good math teacher now, but just not having that barrier to a challenge will bear fruit in some way, right? You're I'm clear. Like I'm sort of stripping myself of that sort of like that tripwire, like somehow I can't do something. In the same way that I will never be the teacher that complains about having 6 preps, and all that means is, you know, if a high school teacher has 6 preps, that means that they're teaching 6 different courses in the school year, separate courses. So you're having 6 courses to have to constantly prep with. Now, from your context, you're like, come on, man, like I have so many preps, like all the different courses you're probably managing in the day. And for me, with my alt ed background, like I've landed on so many courses now. Like if I could actually knock it down to where I could focus on one course for a little bit longer, that'd be great. Like if I could not have to do multi-course all the time. And it becomes a bit of it really convinces me that sort of stretching, and it doesn't have to always be going deep. It can just be stretching better. And I think that's what you're kind of speaking about here, is getting outside of the school. It's sure, it's academic work, but it's academic work just because it's connected with the school. Whenever I've been on a field trip in or any sort of space outside of school with students, it feels more akin to parenting in some ways. Like it feels closer to parenting than doing school stuff, though there's kind of overlap there. Heck, our whole podcast is about that, the overlaps. Field trips feel like you just have a family that's 10 times the size that you're used to. But I would agree, being outside of the space and then coming back really does. I think if you're in the moment and paying attention and absorbing the moment, you do feel refreshed. You feel like you've been slightly corrected, and you come back with, if anything other than you've managed to get to the middle bandwidth. The one thing I will say that's really cool, and we don't have a lot of opportunity for this, I would say that 90% of what we know about students is because we experience them within a classroom. And that isn't always 100% truth. Getting to know a student outside of the classroom, whether it's on the play yard, in the hallway, with their family, in the community, is such a necessary component to really getting where our kids are at. The uncomfortable space within that, in my context, sometimes is when we do an intake and we're having that welcome to our program conversation, and then the student and the parent get into it at the table, or they talk about a topic that I'll tell the family directly, we're at your kitchen table right now. We need to bring it back just a little bit. Though we appreciate the honesty and what you're sharing, we're too close to it right now. We need to sort of bring it back to sort of like a structured conversation. And at that point, you know, maybe the parent and the child are like yelling at each other, or you're just getting a little too deep into their backstory. At that point, it may be useful somewhere down the line, but it's just not useful at that point. That's the extreme version. But you and I talked about some of that positivity, some of those interesting moments that can happen where you meet your students and their family out in the community. And how do you react? Like, you know, do you engage? Do you sort of represent the school? Do you just introduce yourself as Clough? You know what I mean? All those moments of being noticed, I think, give us a better sense of being a whole person who happens to teach. One last funny one that I think, you remember the story I told you about? One of the spaces I love, I was at the movie theater. I was walking past a group of, I think they're like grade 10 students, and our school has a no hat rule. So this is that mixing of paradigms. So I'm just kind of cruising. So they're standing, talking, facing this way. I kind of come on the blind side. And as I walk by, I'm like, gentlemen, can you please take your hats off? And you just do it in that right tone. And they start to take their hat off. One of them like actually, you know, had it right up, and they look and they see me. I'm like, I'm peace. I'm out of here. And I just keep on walking, right? That's the joy. That's what I'm talking about. And then that was a funny story on Monday. They're like, Clough, can't believe you did that to us. I'm like, well, just kind of fun. I didn't need to stop and talk about marks, or, you know what I mean? Like, you've sort of connected. When you go out, yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say, I think when you connect in a way that is intentionally outside the classroom, it brings back cool connection to the classroom. So I totally get your refreshment.
For sure. I was just going to say, those are the cool moments, right? You see a kid and you say something funny, and you move on. That's what builds relationships. I find it makes me think of yesterday morning. My son had a baseball game, and I took him, and he was playing against a team where there's a boy that goes to my school, but he's in grade 1. No, 2. He's in grade 2. And it was funny because as I'm walking to the diamond, my son's ran up ahead of me. He's gone to see his friends. And I see this boy and his dad. And I look at the kid and I'm like, holy cow, how'd you wake up so early this morning? And did you wake your dad up? And just that like little just shot in the arm, that little joke, got a big smile on his face. He's like, no, my dad had to wake me up. And then we all laugh. And I just said, good luck. Now I know Monday he will come up to me and say, I saw you, you talked to me. I know he will, because that's the type of kid he is. And that's just building relationship, right? That's just, for him, those two worlds colliding is not a bad thing. He enjoys it. He thinks it's cool to see one of the teachers at the school at the diamond, get to watch him play and talk to him about it. And those moments are valuable moments. I agree with you 100%. Do you have any kind of homework you want to drop or something for me or for anybody else to think about over this next week?
Just curious. Have you noticed that as you've gotten older, that your learning, how you learn, has changed?
Big time.
Yeah, that's what I'm observing this week. I got back on the longboard on
I saw that.
Yeah, so it's almost a year to the week, eh? Almost a year.
Really? So
anybody that has sort of, followed my story, last year around this time, I broke my shoulder. So it was a part of the longboarding, but I wasn't longboarding at the time. I fell and I broke my shoulder. So it's been a year, and I got back out on it, and it was interesting because my family was asking me how'd it go, and I said equal measure of fear and elation. It was equal measure. And they're like, well, are you going to go out again? I'm like, yeah, I believe so. But while I was on, here's one thing I'll just put to that. Here's what was interesting. So I've snowboarded, like I'm previously a snowboarder. So that's what I bring. Snowboarding, a little bit of skateboarding when I was a kid, not much, more snowboarding. Here's a funny thing. I got on the board, the longboard, and we have a really nice, there's like a trail near our house, and it's a great big long loop. So it's just ideal for bike riding, walking. It's a nice ride. So I'm longboarding, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm digging this. I'm like, but why is it so, like, it was more difficult than I thought, but I couldn't process what it was that was difficult about it. So I'm riding and I'm pushing, and I don't feel completely comfortable, and I'm hyper aware of the rocks on the sidewalk, or there's a crack there, or the wind came just at the wrong angle. Am I going to get blown off? I'm measuring my shoulder, like the jolt factor. Can I feel it? Like so many little things that are distracting me from actually doing the task. So there's the little sort of school connection there. All the stuff that distracts you when you're so in the moment, that keeps you from actually focusing on enjoying what you're doing. And I stopped for a second, kind of just pause. I'm like, okay, this is getting not overwhelming, but I need to just pause for a second. And there was a bridge that I had to go across. So either way, I had to walk it. It was just too much of a challenge. When I got to the other side of the bridge and I stepped onto the board, for whatever reason, I switched my dominant foot. So I ride snowboard regular, which means I ride with my left foot forward on the board and my right foot at the back. And it occurred to me that for that first 15 minutes before I came to the bridge, I was riding goofy, which is right foot forward, left foot back. So when I skateboard or snowboard, like skateboarding is better, my left foot is planted on the board and I'm pedaling with my right foot. I was doing that in reverse. And I thought to myself, how did I forget that? How did I actually forget that's not how I ride? I can do both sides. I proved it to me, but I'm more comfortable left foot forward. So then the whole next part of the ride, I'm like, something's changed. How is it that I forgot how to do it, but I could still do it, but it didn't occur to me that my foot configuration was wrong. And I started to just think about how my learning and my remembering has changed as a teacher. Part of it's age, part of it's influence, part of it is context. And I started to sort of put together the tensions there, the sort of push-pull of how learning for me is different, learning and producing, my student side. And I put it out as a tweet. I don't know. I don't think it got any traction, but it was a profound realization to me, because it occurred to me that I can't do things just because I want to do them in that way. I have to pay attention to the sort of like recalibrations that are going on. I can't assume that everything is stable in the way that I learn anymore. And I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know how I feel. Actually, no, I do. I'm a little scared. I have to be honest. I'm a little scared because part of it is I went looking for tools that I couldn't access. So
very interesting.
To be continued.
To be continued.
Yeah.
Well, thanks today for the wonderful on-ramp that I guess basically powered our conversation. Because I really, today, this episode really, really makes me feel like we did do some decoding about the work that we do and what we're doing and how we're thinking, feeling about it. So I'm looking forward to this. I mean, we you know, in the on-ramp, you and I were talking about how many weeks of school we had left, and I go right to June 29th. Like there's no taking your foot off the pedal, because I've got kids right in front of me and they need to be engaged and doing things like every day, all day. Mind you, there's stuff going on at the school that's beyond my control that alleviates, like, you know, we just had the talent show. We're going to have mission day. I'm going to be away half a day this week for a 3-pitch tournament. So like there are things happening, right? But there's going to be students in front of me right up until the last minute. And this year there's going to be construction in my school over the summer. So literally once we leave June 29th, people aren't allowed back in the school until the end of August. And usually there's like a week after the last day that your fob still is active and you can get in and out of the building. But we've been told no. When you leave June 29th, you're not getting back in because they're going to start working and stuff, which is a little bit of added stress because that means I have to get all my things out of there by June 29th, or else whatever I've left in the classroom or at the school, I can't grab. And I'm no longer staff there. So I'm going to have to beg somebody to invite me in and like come with me to, you know, like I'd be a guest. So anyway, I've got some stuff on my mind, right? Which maybe we could talk about in another podcast. What does it look like when a teacher moves? When I moved into this classroom, 98% of the resources were mine. That means 98% of the resources are leaving. So for whoever gets that classroom next, for whoever's teaching that grade I was assigned, you know, they're coming into almost a fresh, clean slate because everything in there is mine, but I got to get it out. Anyway, that's for a whole other podcast. But yeah, thanks for the talk. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to moving into how this continues to unfold as we get to the end.
Yep. We have similar outcome. We go into exams. So we've got one more week of actual classes, and then we have an exam schedule. So yeah, you definitely don't take your foot off the pedal. You're just kind of shifting from manual to automatic because there's a lot of little deliverable things that we got to do. We got to sort of shift to get the exams marked. For us, we have to get stuff back to home schools for the students that are just writing exams with us. So yeah, we can hit that one up next week. And thanks for the convo, man. It was great for me. Hopefully the listeners, whoever's out there, is like checking in and kind of going, that's some knowledge that we're dropping.
Hopefully it can benefit somebody other than you and I.
Yep. We'll see.
Okay, dude. Well, have a good week.
You too, man. Take care.
You too. See ya.